What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the one and only Tesla stock and what you should be looking after for the future. I'm also going to break down what the news, data, and technicals are telling us about the overall market, and also for Tesla and how this may affect the share price as we approach earnings in just a couple of days. I'm also going to talk about a very big piece of news that came out involving Elon Musk, and also break down how that will affect Tesla. But before I break anything down about this, though, before I get into any more details, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. And the last thing is, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, whether it's $1 or $100, is up to you. You are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks, each worth up to $3,000. And the best part is, any could be a free Tesla share. It's a limited time offer. The offer ends tomorrow, so check it out before they run out. This is your last chance to get this offer. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Tesla was down about 0.48% for the day, closing pretty flat. It is actually getting very tight right now, and we do actually anticipate some very big moves after this very big tightening. And we are actually approaching earnings, so Tesla does have a tendency of popping quite hard. But in order for Tesla to pop very hard, this will depend heavily on the earnings coming out, the data we're about to see, and also how the market and Tesla react to the news that came out. There's a big piece of news involving Elon Musk I want to talk about a little bit later. But first, let's talk about the data. So on Monday, we have some manufacturing data, just a couple of things that are not too important and they won't impact the market that much. We have some building permits and some Fed speakers, the data for all of that and the Fed speakers for Tuesday. For Wednesday, there's lots of crude oil data and mortgage data as well, but not too significant, just another Fed speaker later on. And then for Thursday and Friday, we have bigger pieces of data. We have initial jobless claims again, and then the PMI report after many Fed speakers will be coming out on Thursday and Friday. So we have lots of Fed speakers, especially near the end of the week. We have a couple of them during the earlier days of the week after the CPI report came out. Lots of them do have a tendency of speaking, and this will affect the market to some degree. But for Monday, it's not too crazy. I just wanted to inform you guys about that. The data is not too crazy for Monday. However, the earnings are going to be insane for this week, especially on Monday through Wednesday. On Monday, before the market opens, we have Charles Schwab, M&T Bank, and also many other ones. We also have Pinnacle. That's another pretty interesting company. And in my opinion, considering the fact that expectations are not that high from Charles Schwab, there is a possibility we could actually see an outcome similar to what happened on Friday when expectations were not too high for lots of the banks, but they ended up beating anyways. So it's just one possibility I wanted to just mention. But for Tuesday, we have Bank of America. We have another big one. We have Goldman Sachs coming out. We have Netflix, United, lots of other big dogs for Tuesday. Wednesday is going to be even bigger from the tech side because, yes, we have Morgan Stanley, we have ASML, but then we also have Tesla and IBM, two giants coming out for Wednesday. Then Thursday has AT&T and then P&G for Friday, and the rest of them are not as big except for like Nokia and just a couple of others. But the bigger days are going to be Monday through Wednesday, particularly, Wednesday is going to be pretty big. But now let's talk about something else that's important. That's SPY. Now, I oftentimes talk about the options chain because this does actually impact how the market makers move the markets. It also impacts what shorts try to do on a day-to-day or even week-to-week basis. And for this week, the options chain is not too crazy. There's not a whole lot going on except for Friday. Friday, we have a crazy day ahead of us. We actually have 3.3 million puts out of the money, and we have about 500,000 calls in and out of the money as well on the same day. Now, what this tells me is with the 401 max pain and 3.15 being the put to call ratio, so far, almost none of these puts are in the money. The market makers are going to try to hold the markets up. They may even try to pump us a little bit. I don't see way too much upside unless we get very strong earnings just left and right. But I just want everyone to be very cautious nonetheless. But my point is the market makers are going to try to hold us up, but the shorts, right? The people who are buying the puts, the people that have been shorting the market very hard, they're going to fight very hard. They're going to be relentless. They want to get as many of these out of the money puts in the money as possible. And they're going to try to bring SPY into the lower 400s. So we're going to be experiencing a big battle between the shorts and the market makers. These are billions and billions of dollars going back and forth and just fighting it out for this week, at least almost every single day. So make sure you are ready for this. All right. This could go either way. I will break down more details about this on the charts, but first let's talk about something else. For Tesla now, Tesla just mentioned the fact that solar plus Powerwall enables you to be your own utility so that the party goes on. And this person right over here talked about the fact that their person had their daughter's first birthday party, and they basically just got a grid outage notification, but everything was okay. The party just went on thanks to Tesla saving the day with their energy storage. This is a very awesome business that Tesla has entered, and I do believe this is going to continue to grow for them, especially in areas that have higher demand for this technology. This is actually showing some signs of higher demand in California. Also in Texas, it's actually much more popular over there. It's going to continue to actually grow going forward because Tesla is not connected to the interconnected power grid system of the United States. That tells me once again, good news for Tesla. People are very excited. We do have one negative piece of news. And by the way, I did mention to you guys that we had more price cuts in countries like Israel and also throughout Europe. Uh, I mentioned that on, I believe it was Friday, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. That was already mentioned. Tesla did drop in anticipation of that. But we have another piece of news, which is actually not always the best for Tesla investors. Elon Musk has founded another AI company. He's always just working very hard, looking for new ventures on a day to day basis. It's very impressive and very inspirational. However, there are different ways you could view Elon Musk. Yes, from a personal standpoint, I'm very impressed with him and I do appreciate the work he does. But as a Tesla investor, I do have to account for the fact that this is not always good news. Because when the whole Twitter fiasco just started and Elon Musk was just so involved in Twitter, he still is very, very involved in Twitter. He tweets all the time. And it's quite clear he's not putting as much time into Tesla. But the question is, does that mean that it has to be bad news for Tesla? To some degree, I guess you could say that if he's not dedicating as many hours. But at the same time, Tesla still has a very, very big roadmap ahead of them. They have so much potential. In my opinion, I don't think it's going to actually hold them back that much. And I do believe Elon Musk could do just as great of a job, even despite something like that. But when it comes to this new AI company, all right, I still believe Tesla's going to be fine. And Tesla, we don't have to worry too much for the longer term. Everything is going to be okay. But the initial reaction from investors tends to not be the best because investors want Elon Musk to just be, Tesla's CEO part time. I mean, full time, not part time, not part time, full time. And they want him to just dedicate as much time as possible to Tesla. But looking at news like this, he's not going to be dedicating as much time. So this could actually lead to a negative outcome for Tesla going forward. So this tells me that maybe Tesla does not just rip to the moon immediately. We might see Tesla kind of slow down a little bit to start us off. And then later on, we might see Tesla rip a little bit more as we approach earnings. That's like the way I see it. But this will be very dependent on what happens with the earnings going forward. Now, one other piece of news I have for you guys would be the new inventory levels for Tesla. They're continuing to go up and up and up. Is this because of production? To some degree, sure, but for the most part, I wouldn't necessarily say that because Tesla has been incentivized to continue to cut prices over and over again because their inventory levels are going up due to slowing demand. That is still a big factor in this going forward. Slowing demand will affect Tesla's earnings negatively over the next couple of months. Yes, they could be cutting prices to actually get more sales, but the problem is their overall sales are not actually exploding to the same degree they probably want. And we're likely going to see a big difference between production and deliveries going into the next couple of quarters. Unfortunately, that is the trend so far. But as long as Tesla gives us strong guidance and they actually continue to reassure investors, things will be fine. And I'm still very, very optimistic for the longer term nonetheless, right? This is just a short term hurdle Tesla has to go through as we are entering a recession. Every company will suffer from Apple to Microsoft and etc. But what matters most would be the fundamentals Tesla has, their roadmap, the vision, the AI technology, and all of those things being put to work that will help the company anyways. Now, when it comes to Tesla, we had very low volume. We're lacking volume right now on Tesla, which is not the best of signs. But this happened as Tesla tightened in terms of price action. What this tells me is once we see volume spike up again, there's going to be a huge, huge, huge move for Tesla, a very big one. It's very sensitive to low volume now. And that tells me that we could actually see this thing rip approaching earnings. It's a real possibility. But once again, I'm always prepared nonetheless. Now, the short volume has been actually down compared to where it was about a couple of weeks ago. So that's a pretty decent sign. The shorting is not as extreme for Tesla, and we actually tend to see Tesla perform a lot better. On top of that, for Tesla's overall data, the price pairs data right here is telling me that Tesla has been underperforming compared to the QQQ and also SPY, but it's actually very close to where this previous bottom was, which tells me we could see this thing start to outperform once again as we approach the big earnings dates. So I want to make that as clear as possible for everyone. I know Tesla needs a lot of time, but for now there is some potential for a nice bounce. Deutsche Bank is bullish on Tesla. We have a tendency of beating earnings. We'll see how this earnings goes. I'm still very optimistic, and if Tesla beats it, it's going to rip to the moon. Uh, for Mondays, Tesla tends to be green about, I think this is like 53 or 55, 53% of the time. Tesla tends to be green on Mondays. We tend to be green a little bit less on Tuesdays, only 51% of the time. Then we have Wednesday, which is when Tesla has earnings. We're likely going to see a nice performance then. Also, looking at the data, we tend to actually open up a little bit slow for Tesla, and we tend to actually see a small pump during the second hour of the day. We have our strongest hour around the fourth hour of the day. We're green 60% of the time historically. And then during the second to last hour of the day, Tesla tends to do well, and we tend to slow down near the very end of the day typically. So that is what the trend tells us about Tesla. I also want to note that the short interest has been actually dropping a bit. The daily short volume is dropping for Tesla. That's a good sign for some upside to come. But shorts, what they oftentimes like to do is look for better entries. So they could also be planning on shorting Tesla at the top if it does get a nice pump to the upside, maybe right before earnings. That's what they tend to do. They like to bet against Tesla on earnings. They tend to do that, and they do have a tendency of getting destroyed typically because Tesla does tend to surprise a lot. And we'll see how it goes this time around. And besides that, there's not a whole lot of news that came out. I was actually looking through this, not really too much. Some articles are saying Tesla is poised to beat earnings again. Could Tesla help you become a millionaire? So we're getting some good news, positive articles so far. The only negative thing that I saw very recently was the fact that, Elon Musk is starting a new company that could actually negatively affect them. Looking at some insider data from just like last week, I can't really update this very recently. It takes some time. But from last week, we did see a lot of sell orders for Tesla, lots of big, big, big sell orders. A lot of them were selling up top when Tesla was actually pumping, approaching the big events. We'll see how this goes going forward. This could actually change completely. It does not guarantee anything, but we'll see how Tesla performs approaching earnings. Now, let's talk about the charts. What on earth is going on? When it comes to SPY, I just want to note that we actually have a bearish divergence developing. Remember, I'm saying it's developing. I'm not saying we're going to crash tomorrow. It's just developing. What this tells me is when you look at the RSI, it's been making these lower highs right here, the same thing on the MACD, but the chart's making these higher highs. Now, this tells me two possibilities which are very likely. Number one, we either pump a little bit more thanks to earnings, and then we see some downside. We end up reversing, and the shorts are just waiting to pile in and start hammering the market down. They're going to be watching these very important resistance levels 416, 418, and 420. Those three specifically, they're also going to be hunting for stops, right? Secondly, the other possibility would be on the daily, we have a potential reversal candle on SPY, which means it could just start dropping starting on Monday, depending on earnings. It has to be one of those two. I'm not a fortune teller. I do not know exactly how earnings is going to go, which is why I'm still talking about two main possibilities. But I do believe we're most likely going to see one more pump, another pump temporarily before more downside, probably sometime this week, or we just start to see downside as early as tomorrow. It's got to be one of those two. For the dollar index, this is actually green so far. If this thing continues to pump, right, we actually got a nice bounce off this 100 level. We have to see this thing get above 103. If it does that, that's going to be a bearish development for the markets. On the daily and weekly on the dollar, we have actually a potential bullish divergence. I actually think it's on the daily chart. And that's very important because the dollar is telling us that it's either going to drop a little more. And if that's the case, the market could pump more, and then the dollar bounces and the market comes down later on, or the dollar could just keep going and once again drag the market down. For Tesla, this thing is getting very tight. I am anticipating a big move. I'm not as confident of Tesla just like pumping immediately. I mean, it is a possibility. What I'm thinking about Tesla is we could actually start off a little bit slow. And the reason for that is because of Elon Musk starting another company. We could just chop around a bit, just like how we did on Friday. And then we might get a bounce later on. And we might see Tesla just start to rip up as we get closer to earnings. If it does rip up, we're going to be watching this 190 level, then 195. I do believe Tesla could actually try to get the gap fill at 192.5 and then try to get to 195 soon. But first, we'll have to see how this reacts to the Elon Musk news. My best anticipation would be some more sideways action first before we get the rip to the upside, right before earnings. And the extent at which Tesla rips up will depend heavily on how earnings go. If earnings are very strong from the banks and the market holds up nicely, Tesla has more potential to push up and get closer to 200. But if the bank earnings are not that strong and the market slows down, we might just see Tesla trade sideways for quite a while, then slowly push up but not really look extremely strong. That's another possibility. For Neo, on the hourly time frame, it's very, very clear that Neo actually has this head and shoulders that's developing. I believe that so far it's actually looking weaker and weaker as the days go on, and it's very likely Neo will see some downside eventually. Might try to pop first and then see the downside, or it might just straight up see downside from here. That's going to depend heavily, once again, on earnings and other factors, but the odds are still favoring downside very soon. I'm just going to talk about a couple tickers before I end the video, maybe three more before I talk about Tesla. I just want to note that on the VIX, we have a potential bullish divergence on the weekly chart. That tells me the VIX is either going to drop more, maybe it drops below into the 16s and then it bounces, or it just bounces from here. It's got to be one of those two. What that means for the stock market is the stock market is most likely going to pump a little bit more and then drop, or we straight up just reverse like super quickly. It's got to be one of those two. VIX is telling us the same thing, similar to the dollar. And finally, the 10-year Treasury yield starting to break out. We do have a gap below. Once this loads, I'll show you. I do apologize about my Wi-Fi, by the way. But I want to note that we have this gap down here. If the dollar comes down and retests 33.8, then and I think I said the dollar, I meant the 10-year Treasury yield. If the 10-year Treasury yield comes down to 33.8, then we're going to fill this gap down here. If that's the case, that's going to be bullish for the stock market. But if it actually holds up nicely and this thing just keeps going and going and going, that's going to be bearish for the stock market. We're more likely to just start dropping from here. It's most likely going to be one of these two. If it comes down to fill this gap, there's a chance it's going to get another bounce and it breaks out later on. Either way, there is downside most likely coming later on. This is what that is suggesting, right? A lot of technicals are telling the same story, either one more pop and then we drop, or we straight up just collapse. It's got to be one of those two. Apple might be forming a double top. If it does reject off this 66 and breaks below this like 3.163.5 support, if it breaks below that, then Apple's going to fill this gap and get closer to 160. That fails, there's another gap even lower at 157. If Apple does that, it's going to be bearish for the markets. We are seeing some signs of a double top forming, and we'll see if there is a divergence that develops or not. It could try to pump a little bit more, but I'm going to be watching. Do we make a new high? And if we do, how is the RSI going to look? It's still going to look more bearish, the overall trend, the price action. So eventually some downside is likely going to come. Last but not least, I'm going to talk about Tesla. What levels are we watching? What is the bullish, bearish case? And what is my prediction? The bullish case for Tesla would be this thing just rips to about 188. If it breaks 188, this thing's going to go to 190, then 192, which is where that gap fill area is. If it breaks that, then we're going to be watching 195. If we're bearish on Tesla, right, it's going to come all the way down to retest 180. We have to bounce off 180. So far, it did that. If it fails, there's 176. I don't think it's going to drop that low, though. I do think the odds favor upside for the short term approaching earnings. What do I think is going to happen? I don't think we're going to rip super hard immediately. My best anticipation would be some sideways action in the beginning. Maybe it remains in this wedge, just trades sideways for a while. It might just trade kind of flat depending on how earnings go, but it might start to rip up either later tomorrow. We might try to get closer to 190 and fail around there and close there. Or as we get closer to like Tuesday and Wednesday, then we might see Tesla trying to get closer to like 195 or even higher than that. So I'm anticipating a later push up for Tesla. I would like for it to actually take its time for now, and we'll have to see how it reacts to earnings. But I do believe that we're going to first see some sideways action, and then we might try to rip either later on Monday. It might try to rip up, get above like 190, or going into like Tuesday or Wednesday. That's when we're going to see the real rip as we approach earnings. We do have a tendency of doing this. The reason why we might see Tesla start off a little slow is because of the fact that Elon Musk started the new AI company. That tends to not be the most bullish news for Tesla. And also, it depends on how the market reacts to the big banks. How does the S&P 500, the Nasdaq, the QQQ, and all these other stocks, how do they react to the bank earnings? That's also going to impact us. My gut tells me we might just see some more sideways action for Tesla, then a rip up a little bit later, either late during Monday or going into Tuesday and Wednesday is when Tesla might start to rip a bit. But once again, the extent at which Tesla rips, whether we get all the way up to fill the gap in the very low 200s, or if we stop around like 195, that's going to depend heavily on the earnings. All right. So make sure you are ready and you watch the earnings very carefully. The market could be very tricky sometimes, and I hope you guys are ready. But, anyways, that's basically my prediction. Sideways action, then a rip up later on over the next couple of days. And I do believe Tesla has a lot of potential to eventually break above this wedge and start pushing to the upside very, very soon. And then we're going to react to what earnings gives us. We have to watch Tesla's profitability, their revenue, how their margins looks, what is guidance telling us, and all those things like that. But until then, I just want to thank each and every one of you so much for listening. And the last thing I want to say is I actually have some merch for you guys if you're interested in buying a shirt that says money is calling, or some custom merch by me, a worldwide trader hoodie or sweater, or buy the dip, or whatever you guys want. It is available either above or below the comment section, depending on where you're watching this. If you use code SAVE5, you will save 5% on your order. I'm providing this as an option. It's just your choice. It would really help the channel. If not, completely fine with me. Thank you all for listening. Enjoy your Sunday. Please remain calm, cool, and collected. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Tesla to the moon, because the long-term future is still incredibly bright. And peace out.